And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. HagmannReport.com, that is the location for show information, show prep. Hagmann and Hagmann is where you can actually go to watch the show. But HagmannReport.com, while you're there, please click on the box on the right-hand side that says survey. Please complete the survey. You'll see it. And for show scheduling, there's an old-time radio there. Click on that, of course, and you'll be good to go for the week. Sometimes we surprise you, sometimes we don't. Sometimes there's changes, sometimes there aren't. And, of course, right now we're going to be bringing out some stellar guests. You know, March 5th, 1962, there was an episode of The Twilight Zone called To Serve Man, right? Everyone remember that episode? It's in syndication right now. Now, I'm not going to give away the ending, of course, but To Serve Man, it's a cookbook. Look, if you haven't seen it, come on. But you remember the tall giant there, right? That visited the United Nations. Well, Steve Quayle and I were talking about that episode the other day. And we're not living in the science fiction world. We're not living in the science fiction realm, although it may seem that way. And right now, Steve Quayle and Timothy Albert are on with us. They have a new, their new DVD is coming out. The new DVD and video is out. It is a fantastic, absolutely fantastic expose. You talk about how well done it is. I just can't even describe it to you. I don't want to waste any time. I really don't. Steve Quayle, Tim Alberino. Steve, are you on with us? I'm not getting anything here.
Yes, I am, Doug.
Okay, all right, there we go. And Tim, I know Tim Alberino's on with us. Steve, we're gonna kick it to you. Let's hit the ground running, my brother. Go ahead.
Well, the nice thing about having Tim and I on right now, we hit the ground running, but I think we're going to take people to places that they've never probably embraced before. I want to start out by saying this whole thing of giants and genetic engineering and genetic alteration and everything we're talking about is based on the Bible and especially the book of Genesis, which the first temptation of Satan, or let's just say the serpent in the garden, was to promise eternal life to Adam and Eve if they disobeyed God's, first of all, Eve, and then followed by Adam's acquiescence. You know, ye shall be as gods, knowing both good and evil. And as we begin to watch the headlines of today, we're seeing more and more an understanding of just how evil human beings can be, Doug, and the evil actions they take, especially on the little children. You know, and reading about the Pedigate and all of the blood sacrifices and everything, what people don't understand is we're returning to the religion of the Canaanites. We're returning to Baal worship. When you've got the world's who's who standing in the Arch of Baal, and these are all guys giving high fives to their Luciferian elite plan to conquer the world, I'd say it's relevant to Christianity. But again, I want to say something. People should really, when they listen to this kind of stuff, take it to the Lord in prayer, because over the past, 25 years of being on talk radio, a lot of people formed an opinion numbers of years ago that this is all crazy talk, irrelevant. Why don't you guys talk more about Jesus? And Jesus said, "Lo, I come in the volume of the book," and Jesus speaking, "it is written of me." So the point being tonight is we're going to give you some mind-blowing stuff. In other words, the old gods, small g, the pagans, the fallen angels, their progeny, the giants, they're coming back, and they're coming back with a vengeance. And one of the things that's so important and critical, I know that the time that we're releasing right now, it's available immediately for Vimeo downloads. You know, it is absolutely a must for people to see Holocaust of Giants. All over the world, people are downloading it and saying, wow. The reason it's well done is because it's well researched, it's well presented, and this isn't, like two guys with a handy cam and reporters on the street seeing how stupid college kids can be because they want to play with Play-Doh in their sandbox. So Tim has been doing an amazing job of writing and integrating this stuff into all of the different Sardinian legends, the history of the Nuraghi. So we're going to start in Sardinia, And then later on, an hour or two, we'll move to the desert Southwest. But I think it's critical that people understand that we're not just sitting here to, provide entertainment. We're trying to give people that can quote Ephesians 6, the spiritual discernment, that we're trying to get them to understand the true nature of the battle. I think, honestly, Doug, that most people think that spiritual warfare is something they go to a Sunday school lesson on, listen to 6, maybe 7 sermons over 6-7 weeks, and then don't even understand what it is they're fighting against, who it is they're fighting against, or the power that God has given to stand against it. So, Tim, let's go ahead, if you wouldn't mind, and turn it over when you're ready, but lay out why Sardinia, lay out the religion of the Canaanites, and lay out to everybody what we're really presenting in probably the most concise, historically record-breaking and history-breaking DVD, in my opinion, that's ever been produced.
Well, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And we can hear you, and Tim, and folks listening on Global Star and BTR, we can also see you on via YouTube Live. So thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, Sardinia, for those who don't know, is part of Italy. It's a province of Italy. It's located west of Rome. It's an island below the island of Corsica, the birthplace of Napoleon Bonaparte. And it's a relatively large island, but it is a very obscure island, both in terms of how well known it is, and also in historical terms. Not many people know much about the island of Sardinia. I didn't until a friend of ours, someone who became a good friend of mine, sent us a letter telling us that we needed to go to the island of Sardinia, that there was some very interesting things going on there, and that it was an island that had a lot of evidence of giants. So we went on as many of you know, we went on a preliminary trip to Sardinia, and we were struck with with how ambiguous that place is, first of all, and I'll talk about that in a little more depth in a minute, but also the sense that there was the cover-up of giants. Many people are familiar with the Smithsonian cover-up of giants in the United States. And that is something that has been covered a lot in different documentaries and different books and articles, both on the internet and before the internet existed. It was sort of a well-known fact that the Smithsonian had been covering up the remains of giants in the United States, the skeletal remains of giants, among other things, in the United States. But that was something that was sort of buried in the past. What we have left from that time are old newspaper clippings and recounts from farmers and recounts from different people who went digging in the mounds, and we have some historical accounts from Abraham Lincoln and so forth. But there wasn't really anything fresh, at least not in the public venue that we could latch onto in terms of the Smithsonian cover-up of giants, because by this time, many of the mounds in America have been excavated. Almost all of them have been excavated, and the remains of giants have been taken away and basically sequestered in the vaults of the Smithsonian Institution. And by the way, those vaults are huge. I think Steve has described some of those vaults on this show before. They're absolutely massive, multiple football fields long, I should say, multiple stories high. Of artifacts, literally millions, tens of millions of artifacts that have been sequestered by the Smithsonian Institution, hidden away in their vaults, very much like the situation that has been occurring with the Vatican. However, I discovered that in Sardinia, a Smithsonian-like cover-up was afoot, was alive and well on the island. And there are many ruins. There are many ancient ruins on the island of Sardinia. There are over 30,000 megalithic towers. There were once over 30,000 megalithic towers present on the island of Sardinia, not to mention hundreds and hundreds of megalithic tombs, among other edifices. This is one island, and this is exclusively on this one island. So obviously, right off the bat, when I landed in Sardinia, when we arrived in Sardinia on the first trip, I was astounded by the sheer quantity of rubble that was evident all over the countryside, megalithic rubble everywhere. So it was evident that there was something extremely important, crucial happening on the island of Sardinia in relationship to the other islands around Sardinia and the other land masses around Sardinia. This was something very unique was happening on that one island. It is very uncommon to find the residue, so much megalithic residue in one small confined landmass. So there are about 7,000 what they call nuraghe, or nuraghi is the plural term. There are over 7,000 nuraghi still standing to this day, but at one time there were over 30,000. And these are megalithic towers. Some of these towers are extremely high, over 100 feet high, were over 100 feet high. They were devised in the typical Cyclopean style, using rough-hewn stones without the use of mortar. And the megalithic tombs, some of them are absolutely immense, incorporating some of the largest stones. Certainly the largest stones I've seen in Sardinia are incorporated into what are called, and have been since time immemorial, the tombs of the giants. And again, there were hundreds of these tombs all over the island at one time. Now there's probably 30 or so that are still in relatively good shape. So I was struck immediately with the sense that something extremely important was happening on this island. And then I began to talk to the people in Sardinia, interview some of the older people in Sardinia, and one after another, we were getting these testimonies from these people who had dug up the bones of giants themselves, either digging additions to their houses or gardening in their backyard or plowing in the fields, or in some cases who were actually hired by the government of Cagliari in the capital of Sardinia to extract the bones of giants from some of these megalithic sites, some of which were literally sitting right underneath of Catholic churches, which of course wasn't surprising to us. So you have this Smithsonian-like cover-up happening still to this day on the island of Sardinia. While we were there, we were able to visit on the very first trip. When I've gone there twice. The first time was a preliminary trip. The second time we went back with our professional camera crews and actually shot the film. And on that first trip, we actually visited a site. We visited a site in Sardinia where they were extracting something from one of these megalithic towers. They were doing a excavation in the tower. It was totally off limits. There were signs everywhere. We approached it as close as we could, and it was evident that they were extracting something from this megalithic tower. And we know from the testimonies of the people in Sardinia that they were routinely discovering, associated with the towers, but especially with the tombs, routinely discovering giants from 8 to 9 to 10 to 11 to 12, all the way up to 15 feet tall. The skeletal remains of giants of that magnitude, of that size. So, and again, this is happening right now. Probably this morning, there were people in Sardinia extracting these bones out of the megalithic sites that are present there, the ruins of the nuraghi ruins. And so there's this culture in Sardinia, this ancient culture, which is referred to as the nuragic culture. And if you do any kind of investigation into the history of Sardinia, you're going to hit a wall really fast. And that wall is called the nuragic culture, because obviously there was a culture that was advanced, that was building with megalithic stones, over 30,000 towers. That takes empire, by the way. That's not something that farmers do. And this, of course, just like all over the earth, suddenly this culture disappears and is referred to today as the nuragic people. Nobody really knows who the nuragic people were. There are some guesses. I think in our film we pinpoint who the nuragic people were, and for those of you who've seen the film, you know what we're talking about. But this culture was there's all kinds of legends and rumors that come from the distant past concerning this culture. We have rumors of cannibalism, for example. We have legends and rumors of great warriors and giants, certainly of giants. And you cannot separate Sardinia from giants. It is absolutely ingrained into the history of Sardinia. And again, very little is known about this place. Everybody goes off to the Great Pyramids, in Egypt, or to Machu Picchu in Peru, or to some of these other famous megalithic sites, some of these other mysterious archaeological sites. And Sardinia has somehow gone totally overlooked over the years. But I think that, and this is part of the premise of our film, that Sardinia truly does unlock the mystery of the migration of the Rephaim, the migration of the giants from what was the Levant, the Promised Land, before and after they were expelled by Joshua, who consequently they called him Joshua the Robber, because he came and expelled the Rephaim from the land of Canaan. And the Rephaim, of course, refers to, in a general sense, the races of giants that were living within the land of Canaan. There were different races of giants living within the land of Canaan. They were mingled in with regular-sized people. But certainly there were whole clans and tribes of giants living in the Promised Land before Moses and Joshua arrived with the children of Israel. And when they did arrive, they were confronted with, not only were they confronted with the giants, they were confronted with a situation that would plague Israel throughout its history, probably still plagues Israel to this day, and that is what Steve mentioned, the sorcery of the Canaanites, because the term Canaanite generally refers to the tribes, the inhabitants of the land of Canaan that were inhabiting the Promised Land, and among them were the Rephaim. The Rephaim were in their midst. The Rephaim, of course, were the giants, were the offspring of the Watchers, were the sons of the gods. They were worshipped. They were venerated by the Canaanite populace. They were the great warriors. They were the mighty men of old, as the Bible calls them. And not just the Bible, by the way. All over the world, they were known as the mighty men, the heroes. And in Sardinia, we find the same terminology being used of the Rephaim giants. These are the mighty men. The tombs of the giants were associated with the mighty ones, the great ones, who were, according to legend, in some cases buried beneath the tombs. And these megalithic tombs were literally built as conduits for communication, for what Pember would call intercourse with the spirits of the giants. And so these hundreds of these tens of thousands of megalithic towers that once existed on the island, hundreds and hundreds of megalithic tombs, we believe were fashioned by the Canaanites and by the Phoenicians. The Canaanites became the Phoenicians for communication, for intercourse with the spirits of the Rephaim, of the mighty ones. And in our film, we break this down. We talk a lot about Canaanite sorcery, and I mentioned that this was problematic for Israel after the conquest of Canaan. The Israelites were continually falling into the abominations of the Canaanites. And understand that the abominations of the Canaanites, and these are the abominations that the Israelites would commit these abominations, and then God would have to come and judge Israel severely, usually bringing foreign armies, plagues, and so forth. All throughout the history, the sordid history of the nation of Israel after the conquest of the Promised Land. And so what was the abomination of the Canaanites? What were these abominable practices that the Israelites kept falling into? Was it just things that were that God didn't like, bad things? Were they just breaking the laws of God, and so they were being judged? Well, yes, but it goes deeper than that. The abominations of the Canaanites was a very potent and real source of witchcraft, of demonic power, the sorcery of the Canaanites. This is the kind of sorcery that the witch of Endor used to call up the spirit of Samuel from the underworld. This is real sorcery. This is necromancy. In fact, this is where we get the modern version of necromancy, is from the abominable practices of the Canaanites. In fact, the modern version of witchcraft and sorcery and necromancy and Satanism that we see today comes essentially from the Canaanites. And again, let me remind everyone that when we say Canaanites, we're saying Rephaim, the sons of the Watchers. And of course, these are generations departed from the Watchers, because these are post-flood giants that are living in a post-flood context, that are inhabiting the land of Canaan, that are not only gigantic, monstrous creatures that are cannibals and terrorizing the land. Remember, they said of the land of Canaan that the land devours itself. There was cannibalism. It was a horrific scene in terms of the giants and what they were doing. But these were supernatural beings, partly quasi-supernatural hybrids. And they were empowered with this sorcery. They were empowered with this the sorcery of the Canaanites, which came from the Rephaim, which incorporated some of the rituals and ceremonies relating to the Rephaim, including the ceremonies, the rituals to raise the Rephaim from the dead, to communicate with the dead spirits of the giants, who there is indication, and we talk about this in our film, could actually be held in a state of some kind of suspended animation. And we have some surprising data in our film, some surprising quotes in our film regarding suspended animation as it relates to the giants. Steve?
Yeah, I've got to say this. That's suspended animation. Folks.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, Steve, pick it up, because I don't think people...
No, finish your thought, because I was on mute, so I didn't interrupt Tim in any way. Go ahead.
The suspended animation factor that Tim is talking about surprised me. Okay, and people have to go to True Legends. TrueLegendsTheSeries.com. I didn't mean to stutter there. TrueLegendsTheSeries.com to watch this video, episode 3, the Holocaust of Giants. It not only is it well done, but the information that it provides. This is kind of like the golden thread that weaves Genesis 6 giants, Xenogenesis, Empire Beneath the Ice. It's a golden thread, and it also contextualizes the Bible, in my view, the historical aspects of the Bible. And Tim just did a marvelous summation of the one aspect, and especially about the Canaanites. By the way, we're going to skip the bottom of the hour break, because this is too important to really, and I want to thank our network for Global Star Radio Network for skipping the bottom of the hour break. But Steve, this is amazing stuff, man. This is just, this is so...
Well, it is, especially, let me say this. It is not coincidental that Tim and I got together. I mean, I believe that was the Lord, One problem that a lot of people don't understand is a lot of researchers and a lot of people that have been on the cutting edge, they don't have anything to pass their work to. I wish I were Tim's age. I'm not. But here's the thing. We've got to be faithful. Paul had his Timothy. Obviously, Tim, you got a great name. And I'm not Paul, but what I am saying is this, is that God is bringing together people and people's anointings for such a time as this. Because up until the time of Hollywood and all the subject matter that's already being presented in graphic novels, in video games, I mean, this generation can now basically be embraced with the truth because they live in the world of darkness. And believe it or not, Doug, and this is what you're really critically bringing up, is the fact of suspended animation. When I first started talking about giants and specific generals that had told me about the giants in stasis, and Rick Wiles being given a supernatural dream vision by the Lord almost, I think he said 25, 30 years ago, then you couple that with Henry Gruber's vision of the giant fallen angels beneath the streets of Rome, and God sends him, supernaturally translates him there, along with 3 or 4 other of his friends, and they're all praying for the release of the apostolic and prophetic ministry to be released that these 2 entities, fallen angels, had bound. Now, what's really critical is this. In church history, there's a guy called Eusebius of Caesarea, okay? And some people pronounce his name Eusebius, some people pronounce Eusebius, but he lived about 265 to 340, so he died between 74 and 79 years old. Now, this was a guy that wrote, he's considered the father of church history, okay? This is not some moron that went around, pounding stones and, trying to draw, animals on a wall. A very highly learned man. But I want to read a quote to you that's really critically important, because in his book, Preparatio Evangelica, book number 5, chapter 17, what he talks about was this. He talks about the time of, and the British Isles. Boy, Rob in Britain, you're going to love this one. And listen to this. He's talking about a man, who is sent to the British Isles, and he's looking for the infamous King Og, who history reports was another name for Kronos. Kronos, obviously one of the Greek demigods. Now listen to this. There was this is Eusebius. He's an apologist. He's also the father of church history. Okay, if you look him up, you're going to find out this is no guy on a peyote diving board trying to make up stuff. There was, however, one island there in which Cronus was confined and guarded in his sleep by Briareus, for his sleep had been artfully contrived to keep him bound, and there were many demons about him. Now listen to this, as attendants and servants. According to Talos, a first-century Greek historian, Og is none other than Cronus. Both Og and Cronus were known as the leader of the Titans. So according to Agabation, now listen to this, he is still alive in stasis somewhere near Britain if he has not been moved. Now, the British Isles are ripe with giants. I smell the blood of an Englishman. All of the children's rhymes, a little birdie told me so. So many statements that have entered into the English language center around Great Britain. Gog and Magog. How many people fight over the identity of Gog and Magog, in the book of Ezekiel? But how many people identify that the city of London venerates their two giants, Gog and Magog? Please look it up, ladies and gentlemen. Do your homework. Tim and I have done ours. And even begin to grasp the fact that a supernatural intelligence behind the scenes, and some people will call it the shadow government, the dark pool, the deep pool. I'm just telling you what it is. It's fallen angel land. There are entities of supernatural intelligence that understand human nature better than any shrink psychiatrist or psychologist, because they've been manipulating it from the time of their rebellion against the living God. Now, again, we're talking about the father of church history, talking about giants in suspended animation. So when we get to this point in our new DVD, The Holocaust of Giants, you cannot separate cannibalism from the appetite of giants. That's why we call it the Holocaust of Giants. And I want to share something. There, you can watch, Big Friendly Giant or all that stuff, but, outside of the fairy tale realm, the real giants were absolutely horrific. Joshua and Caleb went into the land in Numbers 13, 32, and 33 in the Old Testament. Look it up. And when they sent their spies, into the land, and they came back and said, "For the land is a dangerous land, a deadly land, for the land devours its inhabitants." I remember telling you that, Doug, and you said, "Wow, I didn't know that."
Absolutely.
And it's not that you didn't know it, but most Christians will read that and not understand it. God has always been against cannibalism. Even people who try and make the Eucharist, the bread and the wafer, the wine and the wafer, the literal body Jesus Christ, that was done as I'm not going to argue faith. Obviously, the Catholic Church believes it literally becomes the body and the blood of Jesus Christ, where we, just in the same sense, do this in remembrance of me. The idea is that Jesus said he was the bread that came down from heaven. So now you've got basically if you will, all of the genetic engineering and manipulation proving one thing, that there is an attempt to do away with the absolute seed, the genome, the human genetic makeup of all who are still descendants of Adam and Eve. It was 20 years ago, at least, when I started talking about genetic Armageddon. I don't know if you and I had just met, or we've only known each other for, 17 years, Doug?
Yeah.
16, 17 years.
It's not long enough, though, brother. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. But it's been that. So genetic Armageddon is here, and now we've got. If if you will, events transpiring, but you are what you eat. A good example of that is I remember when we were talking about Kuru, we were talking about on talk radio in those days, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, some people pronounce it Jakob, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, spongiform, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, that's a hard word, BSE, and in essence, it turns your brain into a sponge. Well, that was tracked back to the headhunters in New Guinea, who by eating the brains of the vanquished foes, they believed, number one, they gained spiritual power, but they also believed that they would take on themselves the physical nature of their enemy and add to their own warrior status and warrior prowess. So, we in the United States, we send a group of top secret biological engineers down there, if you will, down there being in New Guinea. We culture Kuru, we find out what it is, and voila. It's incorporated into biological weapons agents. And again, it's really tough because there's reports that have been done, and they've been done by the most prestigious, universities in the world. And I wouldn't even name them because I'll let people do their homework. Maybe if they have to work for it, they'll appreciate it. But a lot of what is being, given over as Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, they want that on the death certificate rather than CJD, because you cannot kill a prion or a prion with normal chemistry. Now, how does this relate to what Tim and I are talking about tonight? The Holocaust of Giants. When the gates of hell are open, I know there are some, quote, Christian authors that say we misunderstand it, but let me share this. He wasn't on the scene 20 years ago saying this day would come. I hate to have to take a dig at it, but that's exactly what I'm doing. Because, again, everything has been put off. Someday has changed to that day. And what the Holocaust of Giants presents to people is all of the ancient myths and legends coming together, and this mysterious culture called the Nuraghi in Sardinia. So, I can tell you this, because Tim and the film team over there on the second trip, the one where they spent most of the time filming and interviewing, we have more interviews of people on record of talking about digging up the giants, digging up their bones, all the gold and silver, all the different artifacts that came into the possession of the church. And, those of you who have downloaded the movie on Vimeo, and by the way, if those of you want to see it right away, I would tell you this, not download, forgive me, stream it off of Vimeo, V-I-M-E-O. Some people pronounce it Vimeo, I guess I mispronounce it. But the point being is it's that important. There's no way people could have received what's in the Holocaust of Giants 10 years ago. Even though when I started writing about this on talk radio and talking about it, 20 years ago, then it was just, oh boy, that guy's, fear-monger, fear porn, trying to scare us. Why don't you talk more about Jesus? My answer is, who do you think gave me all this stuff in the first place? And for the record, I have been talking about Jesus. So the interesting and anomalous part of this Holocaust of Giants is already, as soon as we are capable and able, and we use the funding from one DVD to produce the next, we're already on number 4, laying out some amazing information. And I'm the kind of guy that likes to tell everybody the end of the book at the beginning, so they rush to the end. I like to give the bottom line. I won't in this case, but we built up to the point where people say, I won't believe it until I see it, You guys are crazy. Well,
you don't want to see that, man.
Yeah, and so, the deal is that they're going to see it, and let's just share this. Your program, Doug, goes all over the world. Okay, you know that. I think I don't run anything on my website. I can barely do anything but drag and click. But I talked to my webmaster to get the stats, and I think it's pretty amazing. Tim, how many countries are represented on our Vimeo streams? Do you remember?
We have
50, 60?
Well, I mean, for this, it's for the Holocaust of Giants, we have people from 44 countries who have streamed the film.
Yeah, but I mean on Holy See. How many, wasn't it 50, 60, somewhere in there?
The Unholy See was more, yeah. I mean, it was more like, actually, I can tell you right now, it was, the Unholy See, we have like 60 countries.
And we're already, seeing the interest coming in from, I'll tell you what's interesting to me. You know the people that are the hungriest for truth? And this is astonishing to me. And God bless the Australians and the South Africans have been incredibly faithful. And it's interesting because the Christians in South Africa just banded together, and not over the giants, but over repentance for their country, because they are facing genocide. And a lot of people don't know that. By the way, I'm telling you point blank, I had an eyewitness testimony to that. I happened to be the guy that I was filming with for the last 2 days down in Yellowstone National Park, and I just uploaded a very important story that people will understand. If there wasn't Yellowstone National Park, there would have been no, if you will, foundation to do what's now being done in molecular biology, and it's an amazing story. It's on my website, 2015. So, in talking to South Africans and getting the emails, the more we talk to people, they say, are you aware of our legends in our country, especially Australia, and they call it dream time? Are you aware in the South Pacific of all the islands and all of the cannibalism? You see, one of the things that I would call evolutionary history doesn't want to do is they never want to tell the truth. They present facades. They present false narratives, and everybody thinks that everybody's just basically a naked Neanderthal running around looking for a good-looking woman, hitting her on the head, and over thousands of years, things evolved. Well, now it's reverse. There are women hauling clubs, beating men on the heads, dragging them out. No, I'm just kidding. But the point is, actually, maybe not. The fascinating thing, Doug, is that we're in a time period now that the cannibalism, the child sacrifice, and these are Canaanite practices, and the lust for blood and the assumption of power. It's like Tom Horn once said, it's fascinating. The fallen angels want to interject themselves into our germline, in other words, be like us, and now you've got all the rich guys wanting to be like them. And if you look at the dichotomy of that, it's perplexing. Higher intelligence, higher created beings than mankind, are basically trying to mess around and have sexual hanky-panky on the earth. Every myth, legend, and tradition that I have tracked, with the exception of minor, I'm talking the major ones in the world, all have the cavorting of the gods with earth women. So when we go to Sardinia, and by the way, Sardinia is tied to Atlantis, and I'll let Tim deal with that, but the point that people have got to understand is this: we're laying it out for you. It's like God has provided the puzzle pieces that have been kind of left with question marks. Guess what? Those puzzle pieces are going into place now, and what we've done in Holocaust of Giants is laid it out. So, and I would say this, in my opinion, Tim has done a beyond, look, obviously we're friends, but this has nothing to do with it. He's done a marvelous job of taking the threads of Sardinia and Atlantis and cannibalism and the Canaanites and all the stuff we're talking about tonight, and woven a screenplay that I believe is going to blow people's minds. And I mean that because the response we're getting is people love it. And those of you who are ordering DVDs, we're praying they start shipping on the 15th. Of this month.
And Steve, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'll just say this: the interwoven thread here is just amazing, and you guys did a fantastic job on this. And I would urge everyone to either watch it on Vimeo or order the DVD. But here's what Tim said, and what you said as well. As we here at our offices, and even with Craig Sawyer, for example, who we met in Chicago, investigating Pedogate, the larger aspect of Pizzagate, Pedogate. People think it's not real, but what you said here, the relevance to what your research is to what's going on today among the elites, the cannibalism, folks, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, it's going on. And I just want to really punch that home, because the context, the relevance of what you're talking about, aside from the giants, aside from the DNA giant aspect of this, and I'm sorry, I don't want to go down a dead end road here or a different road, but this is so relevant in so many ways today. The Bible, you and Tim through this video have really made the Bible come alive, proven the historical accuracy, in my view, anyway, through this of the Bible, as well as the legends that we never get to see, the stuff that's in the Smithsonian that we can't see. So thank you for that, but it's contextually relevant. I just wanted to throw that in there. I'll shut up now. Go ahead.
Well, Tim, again, I'm going to turn it right back at you, I guess, or right over to you. The thing that I think that is critical, why don't you share some of the stuff we've held, and obviously, don't spoil it. But there's actually no spoilers. There's just mind-blowing stuff. But, as you're looking back now, after all the editing, after everything is complete, what is the resolve that you have after doing everything we've done from wherever we're at? You've been in Sardinia, you've been in Peru, I've been in the desert Southwest, and the things that are coming out. What's the thing that just absolutely jumps out at you more now than when you began, the task of going to Sardinia? I mean, it's like it's unfolding in real time, is it not?
It is, and I misspoke earlier. These films, the True Legends series, have been seen in over 105 different countries. And,
I thought,
105, yeah. So it's what's astounding to me is how, as we look at the landscape of what we refer to as forbidden history, including giants and other things, it's amazing how much history has been swept under the rug, especially in the information age in which we live today. I mean, you can go and find something and take a picture, and instantly it's on Facebook. I mean, people are filming themselves committing suicide and killing others on Facebook live. So it's interesting to see the tapestry of this gigantic cover-up that has existed for many years, and I'm wondering, at some point, it's going to fall to pieces. At some point, that we've been pulling on the thread, and this curtain is coming apart. Now, I said we've been seen in over 105 countries, our films, and our goal in the beginning was not to produce some small-time film and just sell it to a hardcore fan base. Our goal in the beginning was to compete with the Discovery Channel. Our goal in the beginning was to compete with the History Channel, was to compete with Ancient Aliens. That's what we set out to do. And I can tell you definitively at this point that in terms of our content, we are. And I can tell you that we are because I won't go into details, but we've been contacted by these entities and agencies representing them. And they're very interested in working with us now, and they're very interested in some other conversations we've had. And they're taking notice what Gen 6 Productions has been doing, what we've been producing, the kind of content that's been coming out. And so it's only a matter of time. I mean, and people ask all the time, by the way, well, where are the bones? Why don't you actually produce bones or film bones or whatever? Well, the truth is this. I had on occasion the opportunity to take possession of bones. I chose not to for a number of reasons. There are security concerns involved in all this. There are, it's easy to sit behind a computer and type those kinds of things. But when you're actually in a situation where you're being watched, where you're being surveilled, and the stakes are very high. The stakes are high not only for you, but for those who have accompanied you, your crew. And and also for, of course, the equipment that you have with you and the footage that you want to be able to get out of the country with. There's a lot of things that go into play here, but I can tell you this isn't about a lack of evidence. There's so much. If you compile the totality of the information that we've put into these three films, going back to True Legends Episode 1, Technology of the Fallen, taking a look at the documentation that we exposed and translated from the conquest of Peru, that states that describes in great detail the discovery of giants, the mummified bodies of giants, the skeletal remains of massive giants in Peru by the conquistadors and by the chroniclers. And then you go to our next film and all the evidence that we put forward in the Unholy Sea concerning the cover-up of not only giants, but also this vast underground world, the Shinkana beneath the beneath the Andes, and actually it's a global phenomenon. This underground world. And all the information that we brought forth in the Unholy See, and of course we were talking about the pre-flood world and the megaliths, and then we lead up to this film, Episode 3, Holocaust of Giants, which now we're dealing with giants in the context of the post-flood world and the Canaanites. We are literally tracing this thread through history from the pre-flood world to the post-flood world, showing you the cover-up, the vastness of the cover-up, the complexity of the cover-up, not only involving the Catholic Church, but also the Smithsonian and the governments of particular nations. Listen, by the way, while it's on my mind, I was recently talking with a friend of mine, a famous guy, and an explorer, well-known explorer, and we were talking about the proof that has come out through scientific investigations of the kinds of things that we've been positing in our films, such as the existence of beneath Sacsayhuaman and beneath Sacsayhuaman in Cusco and beneath Tiwanaku in Bolivia, the existence of not only underground tunnels, but underground cities, underground citadels, and the fact that these things are known, that these things have been known for a while, and that there is, in fact, a deliberate, which this audience is well aware at this point, there is, in fact, a concerted effort to keep these things concealed and hidden. It's this massive amount of history it's like trying to hold down an inflated ball, and the ball's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's pushing up with more and more force and more pressure. Eventually, that thing's going to come flying out of the water. And we're at the tip of the spear, really inflating that ball, because it's only a matter of time. We have the technology, as I said before, all over the earth. Everybody's got their video capacity on their phones, and of course to take pictures, instantly uploading them to the internet. And then we're pushing all of this information into the mainstream to such an extent that, again, representatives from some of these channels, Discovery, History, A&E, a bunch of the big channels on television, the Travel Channel, are coming to us very interested in what we're doing, what we're talking about, because we are at the tip of the spear. And I think they realize that it's inevitable. It is inevitable that at some point in the near future, the facade is going to collapse. And what I believe is happening is that they know, and when I say they, whoever you want to label them as, the priests of power operating behind the scene, the Luciferian elite, they know that that's the fact, and that is indeed a fact, and they're conspiring. They want to control the message, not so much to cover it up anymore, but it's about we have to control this narrative, and we have to get ahead of it, and we have to control it. And what's happened and what we've seen is programs like Ancient Aliens that rises to the surface and becomes extremely popular very quickly because there's a hunger. People know that they've been lied to. It doesn't make sense that the Inca built the walls of Sacsayhuaman but left no records about it whatsoever and forgot how to do it. It doesn't make any sense. And because we're in the information age, and you can pull up Sacsayhuaman on the internet and take a look at detailed pictures and videos and all kinds of things, and people just aren't buying it. So out comes Ancient Aliens, and everybody latches onto that for a while. But it seems that they're realizing that the explanations or lack of explanations that are coming from programs like Ancient Aliens are leaving them with more questions. And so here we come, Gen 6 Productions, and we're bringing biblical answers, the right answers to those questions. Not just, I'm not saying it's an alien, but it's an alien kind of stuff. We're bringing the pieces that are the true, not just evangelical Christian pieces of the puzzle. These are the true and accurate pieces of history that we're putting into place. We're correcting the record, and not only in terms of giants, but in terms of the pre-flood world, in terms of a question, for example, that lingered in the mind of John Wesley Powell, which we feature in our film with Tom Horn, A Holocaust of Giants, concerning the migration of the giants, because watch our film and you'll find this out, or if you've done investigation into the Smithsonian cover-up, you'll find out yourself very quickly that the Smithsonian Institution, the leaders of the Smithsonian Institution, it wasn't a question to them. It wasn't a question of did giants exist? That wasn't a question. That wasn't in their minds. Wait a minute. Is it true that giants exist? That was not the issue, because we have Tom Horn documents in our film the instances in which the Smithsonian Institution documents in their own documents demonstrates that they were recovering the bones of giants, skulls that were big enough to fit over a man's head like a helmet, and things of this nature that are recorded in detail and still exist to this day in the archives of the Smithsonian Institution. These are their records. So the question wasn't, do giants exist? The question was, where did they come from? What is their origin? And I believe we answer that question definitively in the film. And it's we don't just answer it in the general sense and say, well, they came from the fallen angels, they come from the pre-flood world. That's true, but we go into much more detail. We tell you who they are. We make the connection that a lot of people, I think that a lot of people have been missing. Even a lot of good researchers, I think, we were missing it. It had to come in, it took us to go to Sardinia and do the exploration and the expedition actually in Sardinia, putting the pieces together, and suddenly it clicked that what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with the knowledge of the Watchers and the offspring of the Watchers being cradled in one particular culture, and that was the Canaanites, which then became, of course, the famous Phoenicians. And it was the Phoenicians who propagated, who carried the seed of the Rephaim across the earth and propagated the race of the Rephaim all over the globe. And we're talking about that red-headed race of giants and the blonde-headed race of giants and the other races of giants that came from the land of Canaan. And who were the Phoenicians? The Phoenicians were, if you want your mind blown about the Phoenicians, I suggest you read David Flynn's book, Cydonia. And I believe you can get it from stevequayle.com, David Flynn's book, Cydonia. Fascinating read, one of the best books I've ever read. He absolutely decodes the Phoenicians in that book, and we pick up from there, and we show you, I believe we trace the migration of the giants, what happened, where were they coming from, and how were they getting all over the earth. And the Phoenicians were known for a couple of things. The Phoenicians were known for, well, let's talk about the things that the Phoenicians were known for, publicly admitted that they were known for, and then we'll talk about something that they're never admitted to be known for, which they were in the ancient world. First of all, everybody knows that the Phoenicians were known as the Great Masons. They were the Great Masons of the ancient world. That's where we get, and we're talking in a post-flood context, by the way. That's where the Masonic, the Freemasons come from. The Masonic order comes from the Phoenicians. Remember, who did Solomon employ to build the temple? To the great craftsmen. They were coming from Sidon and Tyre. These were Phoenician cities. These are where the Canaanites went to. These are where, in many cases, the Rephaim were still existent among the Phoenicians. In fact, the Phoenicians were known, by the way, as the great seafarers of the time. They were unsurpassed in their ability to navigate the seas. And there's a reason for that. The reason why the Phoenicians were such great builders and were such great seafarers is because they were preserving the knowledge of the Watchers, some of the knowledge of the Watchers that had been preserved from the world before the flood of Noah, and they were preserving the seed of the Watchers and the Rephaim races that were still existing among them. And that is the part of the story of the Phoenicians that is hidden. Because if you go back, I challenge you to find frescoes of the Phoenicians. There are very few. And if you dig and you look and you find ancient depictions of the Phoenicians, as we have, you're going to discover that some of those, in fact, many of them are depicting giants among the Phoenicians. That there is the Phoenicians in their boats, and there's the regular sized guy, and then there's the giants that are among them. The Phoenicians were literally seeding the race of Rephaim all over the earth. But we believe that ground zero for the Canaanite giants, the Rephaim, possibly before the invasion of Joshua into the Promised Land, but definitely after, was Sardinia. And that's why on this one island, there were over 30,000 megalithic towers and hundreds of tombs that are to this day called the tombs of the giants. It was sort of a redoubt of the Rephaim on the island of Sardinia, a convergence of the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, the Rephaim, and then a migration from the island of Sardinia all over the earth.
Said a whole lot there.
Doug, do you want to respond?
No,
I don't know how close we are to the.
yeah,
break.
we're about 2 minutes out, Steve. But and Tim, and I'll tell you something. This is a good time, if you don't mind, Tim. If you don't mind telling people how to get access to the video as well as the DVD. Tim, I'm going to kick it to you, and then we'll go to break.
Sure. You can go to TrueLegendsTheSeries.com. There you'll find all the different versions of the film. We have a DVD out. We have a Blu-ray, and we have unlimited streaming, just like we did for the Unholy See. We have all three versions available right now. The DVD and the Blu-ray are going to be shipping somewhere around the 15th of this month, and we're going to rush deliver those to everybody. And a lot of people have already ordered this film. We're getting tons of hits on Vimeo, and frankly, we're getting rave reviews on this film. So it really is an exciting film, and it represents. I mean, this film is the culmination of an unbelievable amount of work, and we put a lot into this film. We put a lot of money into this film. We put a lot of time into this film. We were in the desert Southwest, Steve and I, Tom Horn. And there's all kinds of, and listen, this is not just rehashing the old Nephilimery. This is new, groundbreaking information coming not only from Gen 6 Productions, but also coming from Skywatch TV, from Tom Horn. It's a convergence of our efforts with what Tom has been doing and studying. The pieces are falling into place, and we really push the narrative forward, I think, in a way that we haven't seen yet prior to Holocaust of Giants.
Excellent. Again, TrueLegendsTheSeries.com. Folks, we're talking with Timothy Alberino and Steve Quayle from SteveQuayle.com. We're just getting started. They're going to be with us in through the next hour, so don't go anywhere. We're talking about a number of things, and all this is very interesting. When you think about, as Tim said and as Steve said, the constant hiding and covering up of the evidence, the physical evidence that we know exists and that is told in countless stories all across the world, not even just this country, just shows you, the way history continues to be rewritten to fit their narrative. We're going to dive right into this when we come back with Tim Alberino and Steve Quayle. Don't go anywhere.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. We're very blessed to have two marvelous people, Steve Quayle from SteveQuayle.com and Timothy Alberino. Visit TrueLegendsTheSeries.com. Links in our program description for this amazing documentary, episode 3. Folks, you're not going to find anything better. Holocaust of Giants. You're not going to find any work of this type done better than they have done this. And of course, episodes 1 and 2 are also available. You've got to visit this, and you will never look at history the same way again. DVDs forthcoming, Blu-ray and regular DVDs are forthcoming. Portion of this broadcast brought to you by TradingPostInTheWoods.com. That's TradingPostInTheWoods.com. Steve, thanks for holding through, and Tim as well. Going to kick it back to you, Steve.
Well, I think what's interesting, the more we dig into these events, it's the time seal of God that's being broken. Even when God obviously spoke to the prophet Daniel, telling, the seal up, Daniel, the revelation for the vision is yet for an appointed time. I think what's interesting is watching time play out before our eyes. Let me give you an example. The moving towards robotics with artificial intelligence, the ultimate replacement of human beings, I don't think that, Doug, maybe I'm being generous here, I don't think 1 in 10,000 evangelicals or professors of followers of Jesus Christ would even understand what AI means, not so much that it's artificial intelligence, but what it means to their existence. And I want to put this into context. Genesis 3:13 through 15. And the Lord God said unto the woman, what is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. By the way, I've never been able to find in anywhere, and as a student of this stuff, and trust me, I've been in places, when I say in studies, I wish I hadn't have gone to in the past, But anyway, there's no indication that the serpent had sex with Eve. I'm telling you point blank. Now, with Eve's descendants, the daughters of Eve, I think every fallen angel said for a good time, show up and the daughters of Eve are hot. But Eve herself, okay, I'm talking about the daughters of Eve. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. Now here's what God says, and I, put the word there, God, will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Well, again, the idea in this whole statement that I'm making at this point is that when you understand the central theme that even robotics in 400 BC, robots, talos, T-A-L-O-S. Some people pronounce it talos, some people pronounce it talos, but the point being is that was a giant, and sometimes, by the way, he's pictured standing with wings behind him, just like angel wings, and he's straddling two mountain peaks, or what may be two hills. Well, Talos was an automaton who legend believes was formed by Hephaestus, and some people say it was Daedalus. Obviously, I remember Daedalus from one of the cartoon shows in the early 60s, but the point I guess I'm trying to make is that he was known as a robotic giant who had a life force in him, okay? And it was like a solution. By the way, Tim, Sardinians did not want to release Talos to Minos, and he basically, he hung out with the giants evidently on this island of Sardinia. Now, people say, oh, that's all mythology. I don't believe that, but it claims that, that it's just all mythology. I believe what it is a oral and a written tradition, and of real biological, and in this case, bronze men brought to life by a life force, and literally a solution that it said that he basically had a spike or a nail, and I think his heel or above his heel, and in order to kill him, that somebody had to let the life juice out of him, and that name has there's a name for that stuff that he empowered him. So what does this have to do with anything? Well, when you start talking about singularity and you start talking about men merging with machines, you're talking about something that's 400 BC. So, at whatever we are now, 2017, that's 2,417 years ago that, guess what? Robots existed. But also in an age of spiritual machines that Ray Kurzweil wrote about, one of the questions I've been proposing for years, when basically Kurzweil his proposition is that when you get sentience, when you get choice, when you get all of the things that make humans humans, these automatons, these robots, these if you will, mechanized or what's another word? Computerized entities will somehow take on a spirit. Well, I can share this with you, that demon possession, and people argue with this. The reason natives hold on to idols is because there's a spiritual force to them. The reason that witch doctors and shamans and other healers in different parts of the world have items that are attributed, those items they attribute to the spirits that speak through them and guide them. So, what we're talking about tonight is really critical. I will say this, when I wrote the book, Genesis 6 Giants, Master Builders of the Human, not the Human Race, I even forget it because I changed the title. Anyway, the proposal was Master Builders of prehistory and all the monoliths, the megaliths, etc. That was really radical back then. And so we're talking tonight about these things that were left in history and covered up in history. And by the way, the number that we were told, and Tom Horn got this from someone who worked for the Smithsonian, is 149 million artifacts. Those that we didn't make this up. 149 million artifacts that are both historically out of context and scientifically out of context. I'll make it easy. Giants and their technology, giants and their technology, and their, if you will, progenitors, fallen angels and their technology. I'd encourage everybody to just go on Wikipedia and look up Talos, T-A-L-O-S, because it'll give them more background. Somebody said, well, you're just telling people to go here and they should be reading the Scripture. You search the things of Scripture, so when you understand the knowledge that's been hidden, that's been time locked, and God's unlocking that time. If he says his people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, one only has to survey the contemporary political scene in America to see the destruction of God's people. They absolutely have become irrelevant, not on an individual believer's basis, but unless we come together in the power of the Holy Spirit. You can want unity, you can fight for it, you can stress it, but unless God gives unity, there will never be unity. People listening to us, they'll listen to us because, they have nothing better to do, and, they'll take what we say, and then they'll go out and slam what we say. Ladies and gentlemen, you've got to start growing up and taking what you're learning to the Lord and say, Lord, is this true? What we're warning people about is what's going to come against them to destroy them. And again, it goes back to the statement Jesus said, if he didn't shorten the days for our sake, the elect's sake, those who put their trust in him, who've asked him to forgive their sins, there'd be no flesh left alive. Well, the idea is when Tim is over in Sardinia or in Peru, Bolivia, the Altiplano, when all these people around the world are saying the same thing, you cannot deny it on the basis of evidence. Now, I understand what truth is in America. Number one, it doesn't exist. Truth in America is this. One man lies, another man says amen, the mainstream media press says, oh, we agree with those guys, and the judges say, hallelujah. It's all a lie. Jesus said the whole world lies an evil one. So what we're trying to do, and I believe we've done it in not only our newest DVDs episode. There you go. By the way, I don't mean to sound scatterbrained, but I've been in the air photographing 10 hours yesterday, 7 hours today, from 5:30 in the morning, and you're going to see something, ladies and gentlemen, at the Branson conference we're having that's going to be presented no place else until the people at Branson see it. There's so much we want to say. There's so much we could say. There's so much it's dangerous to say. And look, this isn't melodrama. Somebody says, boy, it must be interesting to be you. I said, I wouldn't wish it on anybody else. Or when Tim's family's being drug out in the night because, they're being asphyxiated. I don't think people get the grasp. Doug, you're a private investigator. I think, I don't think people get it. You've investigated blood stain evidence and everything else, but in the evidence that we're presenting, it's voluminous. It's multiples of witnesses. It's not interpretation. You can't claim that you believe the church fathers and then go off on Eusebius because he says, yeah, basically King Og, who is also Kronos, is in suspended animation in the British Isles. Well, the deal is that people want it their way, and never have the people's way been God's way. Never, ever, ever. So I guess what we're saying right now is we're trying to bring to you the revelation. By the way, I'll say this, and we're not going to title the number for this, but it's going to be way beyond bones, okay? And that isn't bait. I'm just saying this. God has impressed upon Tim, God's impressed upon me, those of you who have been involved with us, prayed for us, know that there's something going on, that God is using the vehicle and the people that he's raised up. Look, we're just sinners, man. We're saved by grace. And the deal is that, but we have a calling in the Lord Jesus Christ. Unfortunately, Tim and I answered our calling, and you know what everybody else is doing, Doug? They're getting wrong numbers. Yep, but they want to tell us our phones don't ring in their phone bank, okay? The idea is simply this. The information we're dealing with is cutting-edge information. The information we've discovered is beyond anything. And for instance, when Tim was in Peru, and let's talk about Tim, why don't you take up Quipu, David Flynn, and that, because they just are announcing now they're starting to get a greater understanding of Quipu. Q-U-P-U-I-S, Q-U-I-P-U-I-S, whatever. It's the threads that the Incan used, like basically different threads of different colors, and they had a language in advanced mathematics. So, Doug, maybe our tapestry at the beginning is a closer definition of what we're doing, that, God is unraveling the knots and bringing clear threads of understanding to the people listening to this program. And ladies and gentlemen, you've got to absolutely, if those of you who live worldwide, go on Vimeo and stream the video. You get it instantly. You don't have to pay the exorbitant charges of shipping. And again, that may sound like I'm working against myself, but we want the information into the hands of those who can basically get it immediately. Because again, Tim, I knew it was like, in the 80s. I just knew it was over 80. I didn't know it was 105. But there are hungry people, Doug. I hear from them day in, day out. So, Tim, if you would explain Quipu, why this is important, obviously the situation with David Flynn's work, just remind the people of what we're onto and how it relates to what we're doing right now.
Well, Quipu was the system of written, the only encoded form of communication that the Inca used. It was a system of knots and different colored strings that were fashioned in certain arrangements to convey different kinds of information and very complex information. And it was a couple years ago that we realized, having reviewed some of David Flynn's work again, concerning the geoglyphs of Tiwanaku. And if you're not familiar with that, I encourage you to get our Technology of the Fallen, episode 1 of the True Legend series. We talk about it in that film, and we show you what it is in that film. Because all over the Altiplano and all over Bolivia, the plains of Bolivia, and especially around the Tiwanaku region, there are Quipu-like patterns, Quipu-like configurations that are carved into the earth, and they consist of raised mounds. Some of them are ditches, and it's different earthworks, vast, very enormous, extensive earthworks in Bolivia, all over Bolivia, that were artificially created. And when you take a look in Google Maps and you hover over the region of Bolivia, the northern region of Bolivia, and around the Lake Titicaca region, you get a sense for exactly how vast these geoglyphs truly are. And it's a lot of people said, oh, those were just irrigation earthworks that were built by pre-Columbians. But that's obviously not the case once you see how vast, how extensive these things are. And then, as Steve said, recently they've begun to take the first steps to decode Quipus, which has been mysterious. It's been a mystery for a very long time. Nobody has been able to decode Quipus, and they're finally beginning to understand, at least having the rudimentary understanding of the basics of the configurations of Quipus, the various configurations of Quipus. So just go online, type in Quipus. You'll see what we're talking about in terms of the way that the Inca devised it, and look up the geoglyphs of Tiwanaku, or get our film, True Legends, Technology of the Fallen, to get a more in-depth view and a more comprehensive explanation of what Quipus is. Consequently, right after we released our film, The Unholy Sea, last year, in last June, NASA came out with a photo. Many of you have seen the analysis I did concerning this, which they were calling it at the time Morse code on Mars. And the photo showed a very strange, artificial type, what was seemingly artificial configuration of lines and dots on the surface of Mars. And it was extremely analogous to the geoglyphs of Tiwanaku. And I know that if you read Flynn's work, you'll find that he makes direct correlations between Tiwanaku and Mars. And by the way, the Canaanites and Mars as well. So there's something very interesting going on. I've been saying for a while now that I believe that we are in a process of soft disclosure, a disclosure not only concerning giants and the bones of giants and the forbidden history that they can no longer cover up because of technology, because of information technology, but also information, a soft disclosure concerning Mars, concerning extraterrestrial life and this sort of thing, which is featured in the news almost on a daily basis. I mean, if you're tracking with Fox News or CNN or whatever, you visit their websites, you're going to find, I would say, at least every other day now, some kind of an article concerning Mars, concerning the moon, concerning Jupiter, some new discovery. And I believe this is intentional because, as I said earlier, I don't think at this point in time, I think they're switching. The methodology is now switching from a cover-up to a control of the messaging, controlling the way that the information comes out, because they can't cover it up, but at least they can funnel it through certain channels, but also control the messaging in a very much Goebbels type propaganda way. But as it relates to giants, as it relates to extraterrestrials, as it relates to ancient technology and these sort of forbidden historical issues. By the way, I encourage everybody, if you haven't seen the film Holocaust of Giants, I encourage you to go to Gen 6 Productions, the YouTube channel, and watch our trailer. We just put the trailer up a few days ago. It's over 4 minutes long, and if you're on the fence about seeing the film, I encourage you again, go watch the trailer. It's up now. It's got thousands and thousands of views, and you'll really get a sense for what's in the film. Much more. I mean, it's a 2-hour long film. The Unholy See was 2.5, packed with content. This one's 2. I think it's even packed with more content that the Unholy See had contained, but in a shorter film, 2 hours. And there's just so much content in this film that, I mean, we could talk for hours and hours and hours and still not cover everything that we talk about in this film. That's sort of been our trademark, is we don't just deal with 1 or 2 or 3 subjects. We take 10 different things and squeeze them together in one film and try and put them into an order and make sense of these different things and thread that and taken the different themes that we have and thread them through the film, and then so that by the end of the film you can see all of these disparate pieces and parts coming together. And I think we've done that. I know we've done that in the Holocaust of Giants to an even greater extent than we did in the Unholy See. So go see the trailer if you haven't seen it at Gen 6 Productions. It's also on Steve Quayle's YouTube channel. And check the trailer out. I don't know, Doug, if I know some people have questions. I'm seeing a lot of questions popping up on the board there concerning the Canaanites and concerning the film. And I can, if you want to, we can field some of those questions.
Yeah, folks, what might be good, if you do have questions for Mr. Alberino and Mr. Quayle, studio@hagmanandhagman.com, studio@hagmanandhagman.com. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get them here in the studio, and we will begin answering those or submitting those questions as we get them. Again, studio@hagmanandhagman.com. And I also want to say, too, the trailer, the link to the trailer, or the trailer itself, but it is off of HagmanReport.com. You can click on it, and it'll take you right to the trailer that's being discussed. In the meantime, it's amazing to me, and I just want to reiterate this of the context that we're seeing this today. One question here that just came in, Tim or Steve: the face on Mars and the research done by others, including but not limited to Richard Hoagland. Whoever wants to take this, Steve, I'm going to give it to you. Any comments on that, Steve, with respect to the face?
Well, sure. And let me share this. I'm bringing out Cydonia: The Secret Chronicle of Mars, a tribute edition to David Flynn. I've written, like a 60-page paragraph, what do you call it? A prelude. Again, I'm sorry for being tired tonight, Doug. A prelude to David's original work with the introduction production of all the information that's coming forth on Mars. I want to remind everybody that David Flynn was a certifiable genius. I've seen guys who are little leaguers try and dispute, debunk him, but they can't do it. And it's not that I'm sticking up for my friend who's already gone to be with the Lord. I do that anyway. But I was fortunate enough to be one of the only guys that got to spend a lot of time with him one-on-one. He lived in Helena. I live in Bozeman. I go there. He'd come here. But we talk all the time. And the one thing that people miss, Cairo, Egypt, the word Cairo, go look it up. Some people say it means the city of Mars. Some people say it means the camp of Mars. Some people say that its real meaning is this, the encampment of Mars. Now, you've got the interesting parallels between the surface of Mars and obviously the surface of the Earth. You have the more interesting parallels of their orbital velocities, their axial shift. All this stuff is not just coincidence. So the Mars theme, meme, and headlines are now increasing, along with Antarctica. The reason I brought up Yellowstone Park, is that if you understand the thermophile bacteria, in other words, bacteria that live at only a very exclusive temperature extreme, and you understand they're now claiming that Lake Vostok, beneath the ice sheet, has, 7,500 new species? But then they talk about what happens if Earth was seeded with life from Mars in a comet or an asteroid. So what is critical for people to understand is that what Tim is talking about, almost like I would call it a graduated or a gradual bringing people to the truth. It should make everyone upset. How many times you heard there's no life in the universe, there's no, Mars, it's a dead planet, blah, 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 and then they changed their story in tune to fit the latest science fiction release. I'll give you a good example, Prometheus, okay? Well, you've got this guy that's alien comes to Earth, basically takes himself, throws himself into the water. This is the abbreviated version. And out of that seeds the human race. Well, this idea of seeding the human race is called panspermia. And that whole thing is coming into more being. You are the aliens. Now, I will say this, that never have I seen someone's work more ripped off than David's, Flynn, because, again, Mars has everything to do with us, and we have everything to do with Mars, okay? And this is something that the ancients understood. When we were in the desert Southwest, let me just share this. The new book that Tom Horn and I co-wrote and then released together, Unearthing the Lost World of the Cloud Eaters, compelling evidence of the incursion of giants, their extraordinary technology and imminent return, is so critical to understanding. Look, when we're in, and I won't give anything away, Tim, that because again, I want to keep everything that I'm privy to in the context of honoring what you're told. But I will tell you this: in the last week, Tim was given information that's absolutely identical from another part of the world to what we were dealing with in the Native American elders in the desert Southwest. Absolutely identical. Absolutely concerning the lost civilizations, concerning the giants, concerning origins, concerning stargates. So here's what, most people, and by the way, this isn't by people who sit around and read graphic novels, play video games, and obviously listen to us, okay? So we're at a point now, Doug, where it's important for people to understand. When God gives a man revelation, he doesn't force us to accept it. He says, choose ye this day. Well, when I make a statement like God's given us free choice, I get more emails trying to fight against that statement than people that should exercise it to maybe understand, search the scriptures and see if these things be so. I want people to understand this. The new DVD, along with the book, okay? The book is available immediately. I think people are kind of confused on it. They can get it from me. Go on my website, stevequayle.com, Unearthing the Lost World of the Cloud Eaters. and they can download the Vimeo, not download, I'm sorry, Tim, I get that word mixed up. They can live stream. Now, also want to share something. Sometimes people have settings on their computers. When we upload to Vimeo, any Vimeo issues, you got to deal with their customer service. They're one of the best, I would say, this customer-based servicing companies in the world. We can't do anything if your credit card is, being rejected. We don't have any control over it. But Vimeo's customer service be defined, and I've watched things be resolved within 48 hours. And, again, we have probably one issue with every no kidding. One issue with every 500 to 800 stream views, so it's not like it's happening all the time. And then there are cases where they've got a debit card or their card is out of credit. All these issues. We can't do anything about that. But again, I'm appealing to our worldwide audience. Please go on Vimeo and please stream it. You've got to see it. By the time you can watch it as many times as you want, but you don't have to wait for posting. By the way, Doug, I'll share this with you. Germany now, not in all cases, but seems to be censoring my books going into Germany. The last couple orders we've sent over there, the Steve Quayle collection or whatever, they come back refused, and not by the orderer or the intended recipient, but some,
by customs,
some official-looking thing. So, again, I guess, some people say a man is better known by his enemies than by his friends. Well, I've made the mistakes of having friends who turned out to be my enemies. But the point is that we all are seeing an acceleration of knowledge. But what we do with that knowledge is we better start applying it to our lives, okay? Because, again, we are dealing daily. I have pleas for help. And by the way, if anybody's having issues with demons, go on YouTube, look at Derek Prince YouTube's on breaking family curses. If people understood the blood guilt that's in some people's bloodlines, when you're a third or fourth generation or a seventh son or whatever you are, or a satanic ritual abuse, there are people that have ministries in that area, like Russ Dizdar and Doug Riggs and others who are out there to help, and they know what they're doing. But I'm telling you, Doug, I've never seen in my life so many people crying out for help in being set free from evil spirits. Now, these aren't people who are involved in sin. These are people that have stuff, showing up in their bedrooms at night and stuff, or pressing on their chest. They can't breathe. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I can't physically call everybody and help you. That's not my ministry. I can tell you where to go and to start. If you're suffering from, I don't know I'm going here, but this is important. If you're suffering from demonic harassment, if you're suffering from absolutely, there are evil spirits around you and in you, then go online, put in your town or whatever, and put in Bible-believing or deliverance practicing fellowships. Deliverance, DELIVERANCE. And you'll find, and pray and say, Lord, lead me to the right people. And if you don't know the Lord, say, God, I don't know you, but could you lead me to somebody so that I might know you? I'll tell you what, God has an open ear and open heart to honest sinners. He just has a real hard time with religious fraud.
Oh, amen to that. Thank you, Steve, for that. And God bless you for saying that.
Well, listen, here's again the deal. In the Unearthing the Lost World of Cloud Eaters, is not just about the desert Southwest. I'm dealing with what people just go, they've got to have answers, okay? We talk about pre-flood civilizations. I'm dealing also with the whole war, of course, Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. A lot of people can't handle that. And so they try and fit everything into 6,000 years. I have no issue. I believe Adam and Eve were literally 6,000 years ago. But they were something unique. And they were so unique and just totally unique that God said, let us make them in our image and likeness. And so that's something that in that statement is the fighting words of hell. Because that's something that Satan, in all of his pomp, all of his pride, and all of his splendor, could not stand. He could not embrace the fact that the God he had been, in his presence, leading worship, Ezekiel 28, would make if you will, a creation that was in his likeness and image. And, it's real simple. God made us out of the dust of the earth and blew into us the breath of life. The scripture says he maketh his angels ministering, he maketh his ministering angels, flames of fire, or ministering flames of fire. And so it's like he took them out of the fire, and I don't know, maybe the fire on God's own eternal altar. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I'm only suggesting something. But whatever God did when he created us, and that it was enough for God to send Jesus, his son, to die in our place, and literally the Lamb of God to take away the sin of the world, that tells me you don't, and God, look, if you put God into the ultimate investor, he doesn't invest the sum of his love in something that isn't worth investing in.
Very well said, Steve.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
And if you understand you are fearfully and wonderfully made, if you think you're a pile of you-know-what, then go read the 139th Psalm. Because sometimes when, the nail biters, the backbiters, the cannibals, the walking cannibals, and by the way, some cannibals killed you while you're dead, or ate you while you're dead. Now I got to come up with a word for basically believables or cannibals that are claimed believers that, they just want to devour you while you stand on your feet. And Paul talks about that by the word, devouring one another, backbiters. The thing is, when you devour one another, guess what? There is nothing good that can come out of it. So Satan is smart, incredibly intelligent. You cannot deal with the devil on his terms. Let me say that again. You cannot deal with the devil on his terms. You cannot overcome the devil on his terms, and you can't tell him to, go, jump off a cliff, The idea is that to as many as receive him, Jesus gave to us the power to become the sons of God. What we're doing in the DVD series, the series is laying it out. We're showing you that in the mouth of two or three witnesses, we're showing you the greatest cover-up and cover-over in history, and the cover-over and cover-up in history. The Vatican doesn't put their, $4 million spy choppers in the air over Tim and the crew when they're in the area of the contemporary giant excavation. By the way, I got an email, Doug, a couple weeks ago, and the guy said he was at a Smithsonian dig in, I think, the Tampa Bay area. They were looking for something. He put a big tent over the dig. Now, listen, if I told you this, I want to reiterate it. And he went up to the guy who was obviously an archaeologist, looked like an archaeologist, and he said, "Oh, you guys looking for giant bones?" The guy threw his hammer down and said, "There are no such things as giants," and stormed off. Well, I guess the guy knew what he was looking for. Because if it was an open dig, they wouldn't have a tent over it.
Exactly. I mean, that stands to reason. This is amazing. And we have reports here locally of giant bones being found, bones of giants, that is to say, being found here locally in our town, and back in the 1800s. And it's amazing to see this all over the United States. Steve and Tim, we've got so many. I mean, we got so many questions. I don't think you guys will be able to answer them all. You want to start taking a few?
Let Tim answer them all. He's younger.
All right. Well, yeah, we have two questions. One from Steve, one from Deborah, that are the same, only Deborah expands upon it. And the first part of this question is, how did the giants return after the flood?
Am I supposed to answer that?
Yeah. Let me deal with that one, Tim. I'm sorry, and then I'll just say this because they're not reading Genesis 6. Okay, they don't know it. There were giants in those days prior to the flood and after those days. In other words, multiple incursions, both before the flood and after the flood. The Scripture spells it out.
Okay,
that's an answer. You can't. I don't have to go further than that. They did it before and they did it after.
Yeah. Okay, but if there's a third question here. If the flood was designed by God to wipe out the race of giants or the giants and I don't want to be sacrilegious or sounding sacrilegious. Was that to say that God the flood didn't work, or you said a second incursion?
Well, I'm I'll make it easy there too. Go to Obadiah's single chapter. Though you set your nest amongst the stars, yet will I bring thee down. You're talking about heavenly beings with heavenly technology, advanced technology, and there are those that believe they escaped underground. Look, if you understand how a basic submarine works, it's not too tough to figure out that. By the way, giants are not like Shrek, okay? They're brilliant. They taught mankind. The fallen angels were their fathers, and just like a father teaches his son the trade or whatever he's learned, like in the Guild GYLD system, that's what the Book of Enoch talks about. That's what caused the fallen angels to lament, because they were going to see. God tells them, "I'm going to wipe out your offspring." We're talking about advanced civilization that had genetic manipulation prior to the flood of Noah. And I'm saying this, I'm talking about a civilization of angels prior to the creation of the original earth, okay? And so the thing is that when I say the recreation of Genesis 1:1-1-2, when God said, go and replenish the earth, God judged it. So, I mean, they escaped. Tim, do you want to answer that too? Because you had contemporary information, just don't give the source away.
Well, I think that there's multiple contingencies, and I think many of them can be true at the same time. I think there are a few of them are especially convincing to me. I think that there is evidence and indication that I call it the exiles of Atlantis. I think that there were exiles from the pre-flood world, whether they used technology to escape the earth or to go under the earth or whatever. I think that there were survivors, and we find this narrative, we find this kernel in many different stories in the ancient world, myths and legends, and even in contemporary times. We find it in contemporary writings that in the occult world and in the different some of the different fictions that were written as fictions, but that have nonfiction as their basis. The idea that there were exiles from an Atlantean-type world, a world that was destroyed in a great flood. And yes, I was just on a phone call with a good friend of mine who has information, he says he has evidence that the escapees, the exiles from the world before the flood of Noah, that some of them did survive and that they have been inhabiting the underworld. They've been inhabiting the underground world, the Shinkana under the Andes, for example, and furthermore that some of the shaman, not your typical shaman that you'll see as a tourist walking through the streets of Cusco, but a secret order of shaman, the real serious guys, the guys that are practicing intercourse with demonic entities, that they are indeed in contact with these entities, and this isn't some kind of an ayahuasca hallucination that these guys are having, according to my contact. And he was approached by a couple of these guys and shown evidence of the existence of these entities beneath the earth. These guys, this secret order of shamans, are actually in physical contact with this race, who I was explicitly told are not fully human and are survivors from the world that was destroyed. In other words, the old world, the empire of the gods, I call it, the pre-flood world. So I think there's multiple contingencies. I don't think it's necessarily that one of the contingencies is true and the rest are false. I think there's a few possibilities, and they could all be true simultaneously. So, but I'm convinced that there were indeed what I call exiles of Atlantis, exiles from the pre-flood world, one way or another.
Okay. We have a question here from Karen R. She says, ask Tim if they have ever heard that the base of the walls of Jericho are cyclopean, built by sound by the giants, and this is why God used sound to bring down the walls.
What's funny is I did hear that. I heard that on a Hagmann and Hagmann program with Steve Quayle and Tom Horn.
There you go.
And there you go. And it was new to me, and Steve and Tom were discussing that, and it really made sense to me. And having gone around the world and looking at the megaliths and coming to the realization that there was very likely sound involved in their construction, sonic levitation or something of this nature, I think it makes perfect sense that the walls of Jericho, which were very likely built by the Rephaim, were dismantled via the sound of the trumpet blast. So I think that there's a very strong indication there that may in fact be true.
Okay. Moving on here, a question from Deborah. How could the giants mate with human beings based on the huge size difference between them?
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I want to answer that because the first book I ever wrote was on the subject of aliens and fallen angels, sexual corruption of the human race. This is kind of my long-standing issue with a lot of people that use wrong words. Now, I understand the word Nephilim is translated twice. Once before the flood, giants is translated as giants, and once after the flood, okay? It's obviously a word that everything's a Nephilim. That's not the case. Fallen angels can take on themselves the form, the shape, and the size of whatever they want. There are cases where giants literally tried to penetrate, and actually in South America, in the area of the cloud forest, with literal chronicles of heavenly angels with flaming swords slaying the giants because a cry went out because women were being split open. You might like to know, too, that the, if you will, the origin of cesarean birth and the cutting the baby out of the woman's womb was basically a fallen angel practice because the fallen angels, while they can size themselves accordingly, they have a life force, if you will, different from human beings. And here's the same thing I want to make everybody understand. True giants have a preternatural life force. They don't just have human DNA. They have a hybrid DNA. That's why their brain waves and their brain power is so great that people, eyewitnesses, both in the military and famous scientists, have stated, and researchers, that they're not allowed to go beyond a certain thing. So this is why David cut Goliath's head off. This is why the gentleman that I believe, Doug, did we have him on? No, I talked to him. He didn't want to go on the air because he didn't want his voice recognized. But L.A. Marzulli put me in contact with one of the shooters that was trained to go to the giant caves in Afghanistan. And again, Kandahar giant and the Bagram giant, two different giants, but they were told to shoot a certain height and to use 40 millimeter grenades, and take the head off. And the guy said, well, sir, isn't that overkill? And he got the typical military response. We'll tell you what to do. You do it. Well, see, that syncs up and links up. That syncs up and links up with everything that I ever told anybody, what I was told. How do I know that? I haven't killed a giant. But the point is, the guys who deal with them, and I used to have, be in a constant communication with the guys that live in that world, and they have to cut the head off. And by the way, even the myth of the Green Man, there was a movie with Sean Connery where the Green Man would challenge people to cut his head off, and then he would, issue the command, and it would come back to him. And then if they didn't win a quest, then he would take their head off. And obviously, being a human, they could not regenerate. So what's interesting now? Fast forward, DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They're trying to figure out how to make basically bulletproof soldiers. How does a salamander grow its tail? You want to talk about stasis? You want to understand stasis, you got to understand the animals that even go into hibernation. They go into a form of stasis. Every single science fiction movie where you're sending somebody to another planet that was done, in a specific decade, everybody goes into chambers where they pump different juices and stuff into their veins, or put them in like an aqueous solution or an artificial womb. Look, everything is in stasis. Now in the last week, they're talking about viable DNA being again reinvigorated. You got Dr. Frankenstein ready to put heads on other people and double-headed mice. Somebody said, well, do you believe there are double-headed rats? I said, yeah. Have you ever seen the typical conversation coming out of a politician in Washington, with a few exceptions? But the point is, the idea is that now all the genetic manipulation, and by the way, there's nothing new under the sun. The Age of Spiritual Machines, written by Kurzweil. If you want an introduction to what these guys see the future as, you can then understand why the Deagle, D-E-A-G-L-E report even is valid. You're watching, ladies and gentlemen. You're now a participant. You're not just sitting and watching as a Twilight Zone, introduction. The Outer Limits introduction. But you're being, if you will, controlled, herded. Everything you think, do, and say is in a program they launched today or yesterday. You remember, Doug, we talked about, your TVs. People think they're watching TV, and now they don't realize their TV's watching them. I got to tell you this, the uproar until Samsung, the makers of one of the biggest TV manufacturers in the world, said, anything you're doing in your bedroom, you better cover your television with a sheet or something, So the ancient technology, the questions that are out there, how can they do this? I want to make two statements, and this is a long answer. Fallen angels can assume the size of anything they need to mate with, and I'll leave it at that. The reason why many of the women of Israel turned away from the God of Israel is because they went into the same thing the Roman women went into, Priapus, and I won't even go into great detail on that. But the Bible talks about the women chased after the Egyptian men because the Egyptian men were of proud flesh. In other words, they were known for their manhood, but they were also known in their own literature and in their own myths and legends as the descendants of the gods. There's a reason why the Egyptian pharaohs always, even when they did not have the giant cone heads, always mimicked them by their, what do you call those things, crowns or headpieces, or they were always mimicking the fallen ones. They believed they were the descendants of the gods. So when you start putting all this stuff together, it really, really comes in. Plus, we're talking about stuff now that's in the headlines. If I said to you, Doug Hagmann, 20 years ago, would you believe that the headlines of the news would be one of the biggest raves now across the world is human cannibalism? And on the dark web, because it's all over Drudge today about the dark web, and it's all over the internet about people putting out $100 million bounties on President Trump. I mean, they have cannibal restaurants by invitation only. So you've got to understand this. You may find it disgusting. We all do. You may find it revolting. We all do. But the point is there are people embracing it, and they no longer look at you as a meal ticket, in other words, supporting them financially. They're looking at you as a possible meal. Yeah. And people say, you can't say stuff like that. Oh, yes, I can. Yes, I can, because, again, the human genome is being manipulated. Remember the story of baby parts and what is it, Seminex, the artificial flavors and stuff that go into, 250 foods? What do you think that does? When you eat human flesh, it changes your DNA, and it goes into the appetite center of your brain. The same part of your brain that gets you addicted to whatever you're addicted to, that's where that attacks. So guess what? You get hungry for that which you partake of. That's what we're being. I remember a multi-star general telling me that. He said, they're changing your DNA. And then he said this. He said, the real purpose of chemtrailing and geoengineering is to bring back the atmosphere and the conditions that the giants and the fallen ones enjoyed before God judged them.
Exactly.
Now, you won't hear that on your local TV station. Go ahead, Tim.
Tim, before you jump in here, I need to ask this question too. I got to slip this in here, okay? Because we were on this path and we kind of got off a little bit in the mating. Consider royalty, the royal family, for example, or any of the elites. Some believe they're descended from the giants or that race, but they're of normal stature. Now, is this just a purely DNA thing? Is this a myth, or is this? I mean, what's that all about?
That's a very pertinent question.
Okay,
pertinent to the Holocaust of Giants film.
Go ahead,
because as I said, the Phoenicians seeded the race of Rephaim all over the earth, but eventually the Rephaim were bred out to the populations into which they intermingled. In Sardinia, let me say this about Sardinia. There's some very interesting things about the populace living in Sardinia. First of all, the people living in Sardinia, the traditional Sardinians, have have on record some of the longest lifespans in general as a general populace, and There are one of the contacts that we have in our primary contact in Sardinia. He comes from a family from a family line who were known as the Giants. Their tribe was known as the Giants, going back a few generations. And both he and his mother explained to me that in Sardinia there are certain family lines that if you go back a couple of generations, you're getting into statures that exceed 9 feet tall. And we're not talking about bones in the earth. We're talking about people's great-grandfathers. And my friend, my main contact, Luigi in Sardinia, his father was over 7 feet tall. And people say, well, okay, that's LeBron James. Well, not really, but almost, right? That's an NBA player. That's a tall NBA player. Fine. You can reason that. But his great-grandfather stood over 8 feet tall, and his father, his great-great-grandfather, stood over 9 feet tall. And they came from a tribe in Sardinia that was known as the Giants. And what was their story? What was their narrative concerning their family? We come from the ancient giants of Sardinia that were buried in the tombs that are, and by the way, we posit in the film, because of what we find in Sardinia, that there were tens of thousands at one time of giants buried in the soils of Sardinia, and to this day there possibly could still be tens of thousands of giants buried in the soils of Sardinia to this day. And so is there something very interesting going on? By the way, I won't go into detail because we don't talk about this in the film, and this is sort of a private matter, but some of the individuals that I met with in Sardinia who have a connection to the lineage of the Giants have some very interesting, and I would say severe, very concerning demonic activity recurrent in their lives. Severe. We're talking being thrown out of bed and sexually abused and all kinds of things that are happening, particularly dealing with these family lineages that are coming from what we believe are the Rephaim via the Canaanites, via the Phoenicians that migrated to the island of Sardinia. By the way, it was the Phoenicians, it was the Canaanites who became the Phoenicians who were sacrificing their babies to Molech, to the bull-headed god Molech. And if you know anything about the sacrifice of babies to Molech, that's what the Israelites were falling into. Again, the sorcery of the Canaanites. This is what the Israelites are constantly fighting against. This is what they're constantly falling into, is the abominations of the Canaanites, enticing God to anger and to send judgment upon Israel. It's because of the sorcery of the Canaanites. The practice of feeding their babies to Molech is one of the most gruesome things you could possibly imagine. I mean, this was a brazen idol, a life-size brazen idol that was heated up. It had fire in its belly, and they would literally put live babies onto the searing metal of the idol, and then the baby would go down into the furnace of the belly of the idol, and the screams and so forth would come out as if the idol is speaking. And I mean, this came, and I'm saying that so that you understand how gruesome this was. That came from the Rephaim. That came from the offspring of the Watchers, and that was perpetuated across the earth, including in the United States among the mound builders and the races of Rephaim, the red-headed giants that were in the United States, that were in some cases practicing the sorcery of the Canaanites. The Anasazi Indians, and Tom's in the film talking about that. We're tracking down the story of the Anasazi Indians in the beginning of the film, that according to the Navajo, went down into their kivas and practiced black magic and opened up portals and gateways and unleashed giants on the earth. All of this is connected. It all goes back to the sorcery of the Canaanites, ultimately back to the Watchers and their offspring from the pre-flood world.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, guys, we're at the end of the program already. I can't believe how quickly this has gone. Valuable information in context. I want to say one thing to both Steve and Tim and the audience. Look, the issue of cannibalism that did come up, Steve, you mentioned this, and this is so pertinent. Very quickly, Marina Abramovic, her spirit cooking, of course, talking about mixing bodily fluids, including breast milk and other body fluids.
Yeah, and any other nasty combinations.
Yes, and placentas as well as blood and other things. Cannibalism is alive and well in this country. You visit the dark web, you can see it. And you're right, Steve, there are restaurants, believe it or not, that are locations that do, I shouldn't say restaurants, but places that do cater to cannibalism. Go, Joe.
Yeah, and folks, to view the movie, TrueLegendsTheSeries.com, TrueLegendsTheSeries.com. Also, you can go to HagmannReport.com, and there is an advertisement, a banner there with a link right to the video, which you can get. You can stream online on Vimeo, as well as order the DVD if you want to go that route. I want to thank Steve Quayle and Tim Alberino for the fantastic show, and we look forward to talking with you next time.
Thank you, gentlemen, for having us on tonight.
Hey, God bless you, brothers. Thank you.
That'll do it for us tonight. Until tomorrow, stay safe, God bless, and have a great evening.
Good night.